welcome back to the BAT podcast. I'm Howard Swig, and we've got a great episode lined up for today, so let's dive right in. I'm super excited to welcome Courtney Cutchen Frisk to the show. Courtney is a professional automotive photographer and Bay Area car enthusiast. She is responsible for some of the all-time great photos you see in the car world today. These range from auto media to fancy auction house catalogs, and yes, of course, many memorable BAT auction listings. So, Courtney, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
Super pumped to chat with you today. So, according to your user profile, which is Miss Courtney May, that says you photographed 31 cars for BAT, but actually you've probably done a lot more than that. I think maybe we just started keeping track 31 listings ago.
I think so, because there were times I had shot cars prior to that kind of user profile being created. And I know that there are cars that slipped through the cracks, 5 years ago or so.
Totally. There's some memorable ones on there. You did Bring a Trailer's 300 SL Mercedes. That was back in the spring of 19. You did most recently the Bonneville Land Speed Record car. What was that like?
That was bizarre and fun and interesting. I helped them dismantle the whole thing to shoot all of the panels off of the car. I helped them put everything back on. So I, for the day, was a photographer slash minor pit crew member in a way. And pushing that thing around was definitely a challenge. So it was really interesting.
Yeah, for people listening, this is I mean, calling it a car is kind of maybe even a stretch. I mean, this was a 400 mile an hour piston engined literal rocket ship. That thing was on wheels. It's not like you like fire it up and move it around. You just pushed it around this guy's warehouse or what?
Yeah, just pushed it. No power to its own movement. It was on kind of like these dollies on the front and back. And literally, if you've seen it, it is like a missile. Like that's something you would think would be shot into the air, is how it looks anyway. So there's no way we could have started it because it just would have, it doesn't work like that with that kind of vehicle. It's not like you're in a Corvette and you can just boop, 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 4-point turn it. It doesn't work that way. So it took coordination. There were cars around it while we were shooting, so we had to be mindful of that. We had to move everything out of the way.
God.
Yeah, it was a challenge, but it was fun.
That's awesome. So yeah, Courtney, give us a little background on kind of your story, what you do, and kind of how you got into car photography in the first place.
Yeah, so kind of like you said, I'm an automotive photographer. I mostly dabble in, I guess, automotive photojournalism is what I like to call it. Most often I'm shooting at the racetrack or shooting auctions, and it kind of spans all over the map. But I've been doing that for about 10 years now. The career part of it was a sort of natural culmination of my interest in photography and then my interest in cars completely separately. So it mostly started in high school when I took an auto shop class, which is where I met my husband ultimately. And at the time I was really into photography, just kind of casually photographing animals, whatever was around. And once I started to learn about the actual inner workings of cars and saw them for more than just being these really pretty things that get us from point A to point B, that's when I really started to get interested in them in that way of, oh, well, maybe this is something I want to do. Like maybe I combine these two things. I can hopefully make a business out of it. And I didn't really know where it was going to lead me. So it was a little bit of a shot in the dark, but over the last 10 years, I've managed to shoot some really cool stuff. So it's been fun.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. So yeah, what cars do you like personally? What do you own and drive in your free time?
So if you follow me on any kind of social media platform, you know that I'm a huge Datsun nerd and a huge BMW nerd. So combined, my husband and I have, I think, like 10 cars. and then a few motorcycles on the side, but most of it is old Datsuns, old BMWs. We've got a 2000 Touring. I've got my 240Z. My husband has his 510. So that's it. We're old car people.
That is awesome. You mentioned your social. Is that your Instagram? What's your Instagram handle if people want to follow along?
Yeah, it's Miss Courtney May, exactly the way it sounds. MissCourtneyMae.
Awesome. So yeah, same as your BAT handle. That's great. You mentioned auto shop class. So can you turn wrenches too? Are you handy fixing cars as well?
I can do some. I change my own oil. I do spark plugs, whatever. I wouldn't trust myself to pull an engine out and then put it back in without any issues. But anytime, my husband works on his own stuff all the time. So if there's something I can learn or something I can lend a hand with, he's really good about showing me, hey, here's how you can do this yourself. So I kind of try to take a proactive approach when it comes to stuff like that, because women, typically don't really get close to that knowledge on their own. They have to kind of seek it out.
No, that's terrific. So yeah, I mean, a ton of people are, as hobbyists are interested in car photography or photography of other sorts, but you've, obviously gone the extra step and you've made a very successful living out of it. So what's your week to week like? Are you Are you on the road shooting cars 5 days out of the week, or depends on the season? Tell us about that.
It really depends. So excluding the last year because of COVID, because that turned everything upside down, a typical year is kind of unpredictable. I think that anyone who works as a freelancer probably knows the struggle of 1 week you're wondering when you're going to get work, and then the next week you have way too much work. Like it never seems to quite perfectly balance itself. But in a normal year, I have a list of events. So I might be shooting Pebble Beach, Rolex Reunion, the whole circuit of Monterey Car Week. I'm usually doing some kind of press car event with manufacturers. And then in addition to that, it's a bunch of auction house stuff and then any editorial stuff that comes up. So most of the week I am shooting. I try to allot, 1 to 2 days a week for just editing at home so that I can catch up and not let it pile up.
Interesting. So do you like all of those equally? I imagine some of the auction house gigs are those often, this car, the catalogs go into press in 5 days and we can sign this car and we need it shot tomorrow.
Yeah, auction stuff is pretty deadline intensive. There have been instances where I've had to shoot 5 cars in a day and then turn around that night and have previews ready, which might not sound like it's that big of a deal, but it can be a lot when you're traveling, an hour there shooting all the cars in one day and then getting home. Then you've got all these files to sort through. So yeah, when you've got tight deadlines, it can be a challenge.
I bet. So you have I'm sure your kind of regular clients, but I imagine you get kind of the one-off calls, referrals, stuff like that. So I bet you have some pretty crazy on-site photo shoot stories over the last 10 years.
I do, yeah. There have been some interesting ones.
What are we talking? Are we talking like micromanaging owners who want to want to be their own professional photographer once you show up, or what?
Oh yeah, I've dealt with numerous people who I'm not quite sure why they hired me, because they seem to know exactly what they want. So like maybe they should do it themselves, that kind of a thing. But I've dealt from people like that to people who hire me and I show up to shoot the car and it's filthy. They haven't vacuumed it, they haven't washed it, and I'm just kind of left wondering why I'm there. There have been instances where the car was advertised as running under its own power when, lo and behold, it does not run under its own power. So that requires me to push it, which can be tough if it's a really big, heavy car. And then I've had cars, die in the middle of a San Francisco street and we're scrambling to try to get it out of the way. So, it can be stressful if things don't go according to plan, which with old cars, there's a chance it won't.
Totally. So, yeah, I'd love to hear about some of your favorite cars you've shot in the past. We talked about for BAT, the 300 SL, the Bonneville Speed Car. You shot a red Toyota 2000 GT for us a few years back. You did that mini beach car, which was super awesome. So, yeah, what's been some of the favorites over the years?
Well, you actually just listed a lot of them. That 2000 GT was really phenomenal. That was an interesting experience because I shot it in a dealership showroom, which was strange, and it was late at night. It was like 9 or 10 o'clock at night, so it was not the normal shoot setup that I would.
Oh man, usually dealer showroom is like death knell for the good photos, right? But you made it work brilliantly.
Yeah, no, and the owner of the car and the dealership staff, they were ready to make it work. They were like, "Look, we're going to clear this whole room for you. If you need this move, let us know." They were really accommodating. And the fact that it was shot at night, it kind of made the car pop more than it would have during the day, maybe. Just because it was that really brilliant red color, so it worked well.
We were chatting earlier. You had mentioned that mini beach car. That was a fun shoot. And I know the owner was cool. How did that all go down?
That is one of my all-time favorite shoots. The car itself was cool, but I think that my experience with the owner was like unparalleled. Her name was Mary. She's an older woman who just has her cars and loves her cars, treats them like her babies. And it was really fantastic. I connected with her via Bring a Trailer. We set up a day. I went up to her house in Calistoga, and I essentially spent the whole day with her, kind of becoming friends. Like, we had lunch together. We sat and talked about her family background, how her father had a dealership in the Midwest, and they brought this mini beach car in kind of as a promotional market feeler, and the car had been in her family ever since, so it had only ever been in their care, and she had all of these photos from decades of her family riding around in it on their property, and just like the nostalgia and the character that she was able to show through those photos was really incredible. And the fact that she was a woman, it made it easier for me to connect because there's not a whole lot of us doing this stuff, so made it interesting.
Totally. Let's be honest. A lot of this car stuff is mostly dudes. So no,
Yeah.
that's super cool. Um, have you had experiences like I'm sure you've shot some? I know you shot like a big block Cobra, and either for BAT or other customers. Do you sometimes have owners that are like, all right, here's the car, like here's toss you the keys to my McLaren F1. I got to go to lunch, so just have a good time. And presumably there's some scenarios where you have to rely on your own knowledge about how to work a million different types of cars when you're on site.
Yeah, that exact thing, not with a McLaren, but that exact scenario happens to me fairly often. Like, for me, I'm used to shooting more of the classic cars. So anything, if you could call 80s classic, anything 80s and older is typically what I'm doing. But I'll show up to a shoot where I'm maybe gonna document an Aston Martin like Vantage Black Edition or something, and the guy's like, "Here's the key. I'll be back in 2 hours." And I'm like Googling, how do I do this? What is this? Like, I'm not used to all of these cars, so it does require a little bit of legwork for me to prep and understand what I'm going to be shooting beforehand, especially if I'm being left alone.
Well, that's probably a dual-edged sword. I mean, that's totally the type of owner you want. Just like not breathing down your neck. Just let me do my thing. Like you go away for 3 hours, and I will, I'll do it. But then, you got to fire it up. It doesn't start. The thing's 60 years old. You've never been in one before, so I imagine that's presented some maybe stressful and challenging situations.
It has, yeah. Like, I'm trying to think. I think one of the cars I was more nervous about being left with was a Cobra 427 that I shot for Bring a Trailer. And the owner was super casual. He was like, "Here's the key." He just assumed I knew what I was doing too, which was like the cool part. It was the opposite of, "Oh, well, it's a manual transmission. Can you drive that? Are you familiar with that?" So it was nice to have complete opposite experience. But then at the same time, I'm like, oh my God, what if it doesn't start? Like, what if I get stuck somewhere doing, so there's concerns, but I typically have good communication with the owners who are going to do that kind of a setup for a shoot where I'm like, hey, I need to be able to get a hold of you just in case. And usually they're okay with that.
No, yeah, big block supercharged Cobra, or not supercharged. I don't think on that one, but that's a car like that. That'll scare the shit out of you if you don't know, if you're not prepared for whatever, let the clutch out too fast, and especially if you're moving it around in tight quarters. No, that's super funny.
Yeah, yeah, and most of those cars, I've never driven before. I'm used to driving the cars I have, my husband's cars, our friends' cars, all of which tend to be, Datsuns or BMWs or old Fords or something, like trucks and stuff like that. So it's a learning curve, and I'd lie if I was saying I wasn't nervous, half the time.
So, we have a ton of people in our community, have a lot of interest in photography, just from, kind of casual hobbyists to people trying to, do more what you're doing. So what advice for young people, getting into photography would you have? Well, I guess not only young, for the youngs and the olds, what would you tell them, based on your experience, if you want to, make a run at doing it as a career?
Yeah. Photography is for everyone. Doesn't really matter how old you are, which is the cool part. So, I hate to be that person, but in this day and age, social media really is everything. So if you don't have an Instagram, if you don't have a Twitter, if you don't have a website, it's really wise to get those things up and going. Share your work. That's it. Just share, shoot consistently, practice, talk to other photographers. Don't be that person who emails and is like, has a bullet list of 80 things. What do you do for this? How much do you charge? What is this? Photographers tend to not want to receive messages like that, but if you engage with people in the community in a way that says, hey, I'm here to learn, I love your work, I'm inspired by you, how do I step into this? People are usually receptive to that. So to me, it's about communication, really presenting the best of what you can produce, but also not being concerned with perfection, because that's a tricky situation to get stuck in. And the last thing is networking too. Go to events, go to the racetrack, go to car meets, talk to people. If you're just starting out, if you walk up to someone, who has their Camaro sitting there at a show and are like, hey, would you be interested in a shoot sometime? Like, I love your car. Most of the time they're going to say yes, because who doesn't want photos of their car? And that's kind of how I started out. I went to a show. I think the first car I shot was an E30. It was like a bagged E30 that I'm still friends with the owner to this day, even though he doesn't have the car anymore. So stuff like that works. You just have to talk to people and just be open.
Totally. So what were you doing before you were Miss Courtney May?
I was in high school. I graduated in 2011. So, oh gosh, that sounds so long ago now, but it was kind of right out of school, honestly. I did some college. I tried to pursue photography in college, and I found that the classroom environment just didn't work for me. And in addition, I was the only one shooting cars, and people were confused by that. Like, they didn't understand. Like, we'd have portfolio review days, and everyone would have photos of their kids or their dogs or, a beautiful sunset landscape. And then a photo of a 510 would pop up, and they'd be like, what is this? Like, why? So it just wasn't really conducive to how I learned. So,
No, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, I love what you said as far as getting started. Like, yeah, just put your content out there. I feel, especially in this day and age, with how great and wonderful presentation on social media is, photo and video, like cars, especially classic cars, have never been cooler, right?
Yeah.
Like the ability to experience cars through social media has never been more awesome, and more accessible, frankly. Yeah. So like, who do you follow? What are your Who do you think is putting out great stuff?
Oh my gosh.
Well, I guess I'd phrase that differently. Like, like, are you ever impressed by photography of cars that other people do? Are you ever like, oh damn, like that guy or gal, like he nailed that. Like that's the shit. Or are you like, I mean, are you impressed by other people's work, or is it hard to impress you?
Oh no, and I am so easily impressed, which is a little embarrassing to admit, but like I every day I go on Instagram and I scroll and I'm just like how are these people so talented? It's insane. Um I follow a lot of actually film photographers who do a lot of car work, and that actually is insanely impressive to me because it takes this whole other element, right? Everyone is used to digital nowadays, but when you photograph cars with an analog platform, that really takes like another dimension to do, another set of skills to really do successfully. So I'm constantly finding photographers who I'm like, I can't believe that they're so good and that they're not, 100,000 followers plus, which is the other thing that's important to remember about social media is your followers, that's not an indication of your talent. So when I push the social media thing, I say that with the mindset of do it for yourself and for your own goals and intentions and not for, validation from random people on the internet.
Yeah, no, well said. So in the automotive photographer world, is it like a whole underworld? Like, do you? I bet you probably know all the, all the Courtneys all around the country. Or do you guys, have a little fraternity, sorority of sorts? What's that dynamic?
Yeah, you can maybe call it a sorority. I follow like a good couple dozen women photographers who are specifically car focused. Like Adri Law, she's down in LA. She does a lot of Harley Davidson classic cars. She just got an old Falcon, so she's been posting stuff about that. Pulling the engine out, restoring all of that stuff. Um, and then there's women like Becky Evans in the UK. I'm sure you're familiar with her. She's a total badass, and like anything she does is instantly like my eyes are on it because she's these women are so talented and they have so much to say, and in an industry that's very male dominated, their voices sometimes it takes a little bit more to get their voices pushed through, but they are just as worthy of being listened to and taken seriously as anybody else, as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah, there's a little group of us who kind of behind the scenes are DMing each other and sharing inspiration and stuff like that.
That's great. And hey, when you get an opportunity, I mean, the work speaks for itself, right? If you're putting out, an excellent product, then people are going to take notice. I'd love to ask you kind of advice for sellers that shoot their own car on BAT. We got a lot of auctions every week. We are able to help sellers get their car photographed by sending a pro photographer to them. Some guys and gals know kind of the real creme de la creme like yourself, and we'll give you a call and have you come shoot it. But a lot of people, take it upon themselves to do it, and most of the time it works out very well. So what advice would you give to people that whether it's for BAT or something else, for shooting their own car? They got
Yeah.
to get it clean first. That's number one.
What was that?
They got to clean it up first.
Oh. Yeah, definitely have a clean car. And that means you vacuum your carpets, you clean the engine bay, you do everything because the amount of Photoshop vacuuming that I've had to do on interiors is really devastating. But if you're going to do it yourself, whether or not you have quote unquote professional gear is not necessarily the most important part. What I would say is that location is a really big deal and lighting is a really big deal. So do not go out at high noon with a black car that maybe has some scratches in the paint, because it's not going to present the best way that it could present. As if you shot it at 12 noon versus 4 or 5 p.m. in that really soft, creamy golden light hour, you're going to get a much different result. So really take care of the lighting that you're shooting in. And then as far as locations go, aim for something that is nice to look at, but not distracting. You want it to be, if anything, mildly complimentary for the car. That means no garbage cans in the background, no crowded parking lots. Um, you want to make sure that that car is front and center, and that's what the viewers are focused on. You don't want them looking, oh, is that this building in San Francisco, or is that, that's not the point. The point is to sell the car, which is the product. So a clean, aesthetically pleasing background that's not too distracting is ideal.
Totally. No, we see some people come through and they did everything right, but it's like, but you parked your car underneath the basketball hoop, and everything else is killer, but you need to move it back 5 feet. But yeah, scouting locations. I mean, obviously, if you get a local car, you're very familiar with kind of your favorite places to shoot. Um, if you get a job like when you did that job, you did 5 cars in a day. Maybe you had to shoot some of those in the middle of the day at high noon. How did that work? Is you aim for kind of dawn and dusk is ideal.
Yeah, so I think it depends on the job. That instance that I mentioned specifically was all of these cars for one seller. So they all had to be done in the same day. And so when we were looking at it in terms of consistency, all of these cars were being presented as one lot. So we had to think, okay, well, the light's going to be different all day long. Do we want that, or do we want to shoot in an indoor setting, maybe like a shop or a warehouse where we have artificial lighting? We can make everything look the exact same way. So you have choices like that to make based on your options. So for those 5 cars, we did shoot them indoors, so no one was any the wiser in terms of when they were shot.
We had a guy who sold his 65 GT350 fastback Mustang, and he was located in Hawaii, so we were having some trouble hooking him up with a photographer. So he shot the whole car on his iPhone,
Yeah.
and the car was great. It sold, had an excellent result, and he made it work. Can you make it work? Can you pull it off with? And what do they call him now? An iPhoneographer, right? Does that work, or is that a little sketch?
Um, you have to be careful, but it works. I personally think that it works because the way that I've used my phone to shoot things, sometimes I don't even use the DSLR or the 35 millimeter camera that I have with me because I got carried away using my iPhone. So that shows you what the phones are capable of and what the technology can do now. Not to say that it discounts professional photographers in any way, because it doesn't. But if that's what you have to work with, you can totally make an iPhone work. You just be careful that you're not blowing out highlights or letting things get swallowed up in shadows. That's the kind of stuff you want to really watch out for. But in terms of things like focus, I mean, with a phone, you're not going to really miss focus if you're shooting a stationary car and trying to get interior photos. Everything is going to be clear, so it eliminates some of the risk involved if you're doing it yourself and you're not, a professional.
Interesting. No, I'm glad you mentioned equipment because I definitely wanted to ask you about that. So, admittedly, I don't know much about photography or camera equipment, so maybe that makes me a perfect interviewer for the subject. But yeah, I think folks would love to know kind of what you use, what's in your camera bag, and what's your setup.
Yeah, so for auctions specifically, I usually show up. I shoot all Nikon, so that might start a war between Canon and Nikon users. But I have my D850, which is a full frame DSLR. It allows me to shoot in RAW format, which is basically just the file format that has the most digital information available. So it's the most manipulatable. If manipulatable? Don't know if that's a word.
I
It's
think it's a word. It's a word as of today.
it's the most easily manipulated in terms of putting it into software like Lightroom or Photoshop. Um, let's say I shoot something, that is really underexposed. I just pop that into Lightroom, bring up the exposure, and it looks good. So I have the D850 is my main shooter. I've got a couple backup cameras like a D750. Um, and then in terms of lenses, I don't really have a huge arsenal. I have 85 millimeter prime 50 millimeter prime, 35 millimeter, a lot of prime lenses, just because that's my own personal preference. I like the way prime glass shoots. Um, and yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all that's really necessary for me to get a job done. I don't usually utilize a lot of artificial light. Natural light is kind of my jam, so I travel pretty light.
Oh man, we got a number of BAT staffers that are into photography, and if they were here, they'd be like asking all these follow-up questions for everything you just said. All of those lenses you just mentioned, I have no idea what that stuff means, but people listening who are into photography, I'm sure that they do. So is that to say that you'll roll with 2 or 3 lenses max, and that's all you need to make it happen?
Yeah, for the most part, because right when you're shooting an auction, the goal is to represent the car in the most honest way, but also in the way that makes it look the most appealing. So there's a balance to strike there for sure, but I don't necessarily need 10 lenses to choose from. I can show up with one lens that I'm going to shoot, or let's say 1 to 2 lenses that I'm going to shoot all of the exterior for, and then maybe another 1 to 2 for the interior, trunk, engine bay, underside, that kind of thing. So I just need the focal lengths that are going to most accurately represent the car in an image and not distort it. So, I'm not going to choose a 24 millimeter lens to shoot the exterior because it's going to bubble the car. It's going to completely distort it. But if I pick something like a 50 millimeter or an 85 millimeter or, 200 millimeter, whatever, the car is going to translate a lot better in that image. So it's all about the kind of the thought process leading up to what lenses you're actually going to bring with you.
Cool. And I'm sure, like in any carefully honed craft, equipment is one part of the puzzle, but obviously talent and honing your skill is another. So with photography, how does it work? Like if someone who knew nothing about shooting cars, for example, went out and bought whatever the absolute best equipment was, can that make that person look like a hero? Or do you need to know what you're doing, despite if you got the $20,000 camera with you?
Um, that I don't think it's going to make you look like a hero in the way that that person wants to be seen as a hero. I'm
Totally.
a firm believer that you do not need the most expensive gear. You do not need the newest gear. You need whatever you are familiar with or comfortable with using, and you need to just shoot in a way that works for you. Don't get caught up with, well, I have, my camera's 4 years old. Is it just unusable now? No, it's not. It's not, because the quality of the gear, it's not like when the new thing comes out, your old gear is just obsolete. That's not how it works. It's not, an iPhone where the new one comes out and you need the new one. And most of the time when people do kind of flex with their gear, they go out and buy the most expensive thing. Chances are they don't know how to use it. And
That's like number one sign that they're not at the top of their game.
Absolutely, yeah. It shows me, okay, well, you want to bring your camera to the car meet, and you just got a new Leica, and you're like, oh, look, this is my $15,000 camera that I barely know how to use, and I'm like, okay, that's cool, but do you need it? You don't. You really don't. So, and that's fine, but the idea that you need really expensive equipment to make good photographs is a complete lie. It's
Totally.
not true.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you go to a track day or something, and it's beginners in anything are great because you need it for whatever the hobby is. But the person that wants to put on the stickiest tires and dial up his turbo to the highest setting for the most power, it's like, no, dude, you need to start in a Miata on street tires and learn how to drive first. So kind of a similar philosophy, right?
Exactly. But yeah, that's a perfect representation for it.
So you had mentioned 2020. Obviously, in your world, a lot of stuff slowed down. Is that bouncing back now that we're in the spring? What are you doing the rest of the year?
Well, as far as my schedule for the year goes, it is kind of in the air, but I am seeing some positive signs that things are coming back, so that's good. I really think that it's going to depend on, the vaccine rollout in terms of events. Last year was the first year I didn't shoot a single event. Actually, no, that's a lie. In January and February, I shot 2 events, one each month, and then everything shut down. So for me, I'm used to covering events and in-person gatherings and races and stuff like that. So to go a whole year without that was really surreal and kind of kind of kind of shakes you a little bit because it's like you're used to doing this thing for so many years and suddenly it's all gone. So I see promising signs that those are going to be coming back this year, but to what extent I don't really know. Um, I'm sure that if worst comes to worst, it's going to be, press only, and there won't really be spectators or that kind of a thing. So I'm just kind of playing it by ear in terms of that, and waiting to see what happens.
Totally. And as you look forward, thinking about building your business and your brand, I mean, you're only one person, so you can only do so much in a day, a week, and a month. What do you have any grand plans for the future and what you want your business to become, or is it you taking it week by week?
If you had asked me that question a year and a half ago, I probably would have had a different answer. But COVID has really, I think, forced a lot of people, especially in the creative industry, to focus on, okay, what can I achieve now and what is reasonable for me to set as a goal? So for me right now, honestly, it is taking it week by week and month by month and just waiting to see how things change and how they come back. I would love to go to press events again. I'd love to get in a press car. I'd love to go to a race again. Those are the things that really fulfill me. And in the grand scheme, I would like to do more motorsport photography. So maybe that means going to Europe and, covering a circuit there. But for right now, it's so bizarre, the world that we're living in. So I'm just waiting for more stability to really be able to tell.
Totally. And so you guys got your 510s and your 2002s. Are you guys planning to do any driving events this year? You have any time to do that stuff?
In terms of driving events, outside of things, like going on cruises with friends or maybe like the Breakfast Club rally, I'd really like to do that soon. Nothing too spectacular, really. We're just as the car meets come back, I'm sure we'll be out there more frequently. But for now, we're just kind of putzing around town in our old cars.
Awesome. Well, no, you and us both. Awesome. Well, Courtney, this has been awesome to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time. If folks want to check you out, Miss Courtney May on Instagram. What else? You got a little Clubhouse following, some Twitter, or is Instagram your main jam?
Instagram's for sure the main jam. I have a website too, which is more of an official portfolio. You can contact me. You can see some of the stuff I've done. And that's just CourtneyCutchenPhotography.com.
Awesome. Thank you again. Good luck, and we'll see you out there this year.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.